Good morning, everyone. We are so excited to be here. Welcome to Sky Observers Hangout. Oh my goodness, it is so great to be on. Hello, hello. My name is Michelle, and welcome to Sky Observers Hangout at a very special night and time, or morning and time, depending on where you are. I'm the Director of Public Observing at the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, and I have a friend joining me. Hello, Hunter.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Hunter. I'm the public observing educator here at the Adler. We also have some other friends with us behind the scenes tonight. In our YouTube chat, we've got our chat moderator, Colleen, who you'll see highlighted as the Adler's name in yellow. We've also got our astronomer friend, Geza, joining us in the chat. So if you have any really in-depth astronomy questions, he'll be great at helping with those tonight. When you see a name with a blue wrench next to it in the chat, that's Geza helping us answering out questions tonight.
As we always say, Sky Observers Hangout is your chance to gather together with us and nerd out about the sky. Our goal is to give you practical tips and information that you can find useful for all things sky observing. And if you want to just watch us, that's perfectly okay. But if you want to join in the chat, we would love to see your comments and questions. And feel free to interact with each other and with us in that chat. Now, it is in the middle of the night / early morning here in Chicago. And we know that there are folks that tune in from various locations. I'm starting to see some notations in the chat about where you're from. So we're going to see you from all over the world, more than likely. So hopefully, if it's clear where you are, you're able to see the eclipse as well, the lunar eclipse, which is why we're here. But if it's cloudy, we're going to bring you a great view of it, because wonder of wonders, it's clear here in Chicago in November. It's amazing. So anyway, we would love to know, where are you tuning in from? So put that in the chat. We'd love to know. All right.
Yeah, as an added bonus, let us know. Are you able to see the moon in the sky where you are right now? Because while we love to observe ourselves, we also love to hear that you're observing too.
That's fantastic. So while you're doing that, hey, the Adler Planetarium is back open. We couldn't not do this and not mention that. So Colleen is going to put a link to purchase tickets in the chat if you ever want to come visit us in person at a more reasonable time of day when we're open during our regular hours. So anyway, Hunter, go ahead.
Yeah, you can also help us get more visibility for our shows by hitting subscribe to the Adler Planetarium's YouTube channel right below this video. If you like the content, give this video a thumbs up too. We really appreciate it. Doing this will help you stay in the know on our online programming, like our next Sky Observers Hangout show coming up on December 7th at 9 p.m. Central Time. There we'll be observing the lunar occultation of Mars. And that one will hopefully be through the Dome Observatory if the weather cooperates. So keep an eye on our social media channels and our website for more information about that exciting news.
Yes, I just saw a comment in the chat that in Japan, it's a reasonable time of day. So we actually have to say good late night on the November 7th for folks far west who it hasn't quite hit midnight yet. Good morning to those of you in the continental US. Good evening on November 8th for those of you in the far eastern regions who can see this lunar eclipse at a very reasonable time. So welcome to everyone for joining us. So Hunter, you ready to show these folks the moon? You ready?
Oh my gosh, of course. That's always our big goal here tonight, right?
Yes, it is. And also, I saw someone ask about camera settings to be able to view the moon. This is the coolest part, I think, about what we're about to show you. I'm actually using a DSLR camera. So if you have a DSLR camera, hopefully what I'm about to show you, because I'm going to screen share, excuse me, I'm going to screen share and show you what my camera is showing me. So give me a second. I'm going to check and make sure that the camera is good. Yes, it is. And so I'm going to go back to Zoom, and I'm just talking my way through this so Hunter knows what I'm doing, because we're about 40 miles apart right now. So
Yes, but together in spirit, like everybody here in the chat, I see some folks are joining from New Zealand, which is exciting. So we're going to have people watching the eclipse as the moon sets here in Chicago and as it rises there on the opposite side of the world. That's so exciting.
It's fantastic. Where else do we have folks joining us from? What do you see?
We got some folks joining from all around Chicago, Hyde Park, downtown, the south side, Mokina, Illinois, northwest side, Seattle, California, all over the place. It's
Oh,
exciting.
fantastic. That's awesome. Welcome to absolutely everyone. So, surprise, surprise, there's a lunar eclipse going on. If you were joining us at 3 o'clock in the morning Central Time and you go, wow, why is the Adler Planetarium on? There's a lunar eclipse going on right now. And so, what I have is a live view of the eclipse, and I'm going to prove that it's a live view. I'm going to move my camera so you can see that. And I've got it up at the upper left part of the camera view here. My camera has computer software so I can control it. So that's the neatest thing is I'm trying to match how I see the moon in the sky, which is right there. And my camera is right here and my computer is right here. So I'm trying to match the settings to what I see because the partial phase of the eclipse is just about to start. So what I have to do is adjust the settings just slightly. I've got it a little bit dark. So I want to match it again to what I see in the sky. So I need to switch the settings. There we go. In case anyone's curious, my DSLR is currently set for 1/1600th of a second at f7.1 and an ISO of 1600. I'm going to adjust the ISO just a tiny bit just to see. Nope, too much. We'll go back. There we go. So that's pretty much how I see it in the sky. So the partial phase, again, is just about to start. We'll talk in a second about what causes a lunar eclipse, but we at least wanted to dive right in and show you a view because, I mean, that's why we're all here, right?
Yeah, no, I like that you were bringing up, trying to make the image that you're producing with your camera look like kind of similar to what you're seeing in the night sky. So can you like explain a little bit more about like why that's important with the camera settings?
Exactly. So if the camera is set correctly, I can let in the right amount of light to be able to match how my eyes are seeing the view. Now my eyes and my brain can automatically adjust, which means human eyes and human brains are just incredible machines and incredible instruments. But what I have to do for the camera is periodically adjust the shutter speed. So as the moon gets darker, I'm probably going to have to increase the shutter speed to let in enough light to be able to show you the view. And then the F number also adjusts the amount of light that the camera is letting in. So with both of those together, I've got a pretty decent approximation to what I see. I'm still seeing it as a little bit dark. So again, I'm adjusting that.
Well, I'm excited to see how we have to change these settings throughout the night as the appearance of the moon changes
Yeah,
throughout the
exactly.
eclipse.
Exactly. So the partial phase is just about to start in about 1 minute. So wherever you're watching from, we're all seeing the moon the same way. That's the other cool part is the eclipse is happening. We're all seeing it exactly the same. It's not like you're seeing it in totality in one part of the planet and a partial phase in another part of the planet. We're all seeing it at the beginning of the partial phase. It's just what time is it where you are, where the partial phase is actually starting to occur. So I've got it set fairly close. Again, it's a little bit dark, but that's okay. I think it still looks pretty cool. So it's not how I'm seeing it in the sky. This part on the upper left of the moon is a little bit darker than how my eyes are seeing it, but I think it's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Yeah, one thing I love about these more like long-term observing sessions where we're really looking at one object for a long time is seeing those slow, gradual changes. So I'm excited to see how that goes throughout the next hour or two. We did have a
Exactly.
question in the chat here, Michelle, from
Yes.
Rebecca. Which DSLR camera do you use?
This is my personal camera, so this is not necessarily an endorsement by the Adler Planetarium about any one particular brand or anything, but I have a Canon EOS Rebel 5i. I think it's a 5i. And I know there are other Canon EOS Rebel models that are newer, but we have a 5, and so this is the camera that I have that just happens to work great to show the moon. And it comes with software that I installed on my laptop so I can control the camera remotely. I'm going to see if I can show you. I'm going to change the view. I'm going to show my actual window. So forgive me, Hunter, you're going to show up a little strangely because I'm going to show my actual screen. So here I've got the screen. I'm going to try to move Hunter right out of the way, right there. There we go. So sorry, Hunter. So I've got the settings right here. So I'm adjusting the shutter speed here, the amount of light that the camera's letting in. Essentially the brightness is the ISO, you could say, close enough. If I wanted to take a picture, I could hit that little button right there. I might take a picture later. We'll see. But yeah, this is the software that just comes with this camera. And there are other cameras out there, and there are other cameras that probably have similar type software, but that's what I've got for this one. And so
Yeah,
what
I
you'll
think
see,
really,
what you'll see me do periodically is reach over, and I might. So I'm tapping the camera right now. So this just proves that I really am doing this live. There we go. I was adjusting the focus just slightly. There you go.
yeah, it looks great
Either that or
tonight.
I timed that tap in a recorded video perfectly, right?
That would be very impressive. I know when we have the telescopes out, if anybody says that they think it's a sticker, I always offer, hey, you can move it around, see that it moves. It's always a good sign.
Exactly. Do we have any more questions happening in the chat?
Doesn't look like we have any more questions. We've got Geza sharing some awesome information about eclipses and how they work. And one thing I wanted to note is, while of course the DSLR that you have is working fantastically tonight, really any DSLR, anything that has the control of these kinds of settings, like your ISO, your exposure times, should do a great job seeing something like this.
Yeah, and actually we can take pictures using our camera phones. So do
Absolutely.
we want to tell people a little bit about that?
Yeah, I
I
can
know we're
share a little
jumping
bit
around.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stop sharing. We'll come back to the view in just a sec, but why don't we show folks, because if they're watching and they go, man, I wanna capture this. How do I do that?
Yeah, so one thing that I'll say is that lunar eclipses are really fun and easy to view. It's something that's really big and bright in the sky with the moon. And so it's something that we can really easily go out and see with our naked eye, no need for a telescope or any fancy technology. But the tricky bit can sometimes happen when you want to try taking a picture of what you see with your eyes and recreate that, especially with a smartphone. So we've seen that DSLRs could do a really fantastic job. But sometimes if you've paid attention to the sky before, you might have noticed like the moon on certain nights can look very magical, very beautiful. You might think to yourself, wow, let me try and capture this beautiful night that I'm seeing. You might take out your smartphone, try taking a picture, and then really excited to see this beautiful image of the moon that you saw it with your eyes. But sometimes, what happens? Let's talk about it, Michelle. Does it always look super great when you take it through your phone?
Yeah, no, it actually usually looks pretty bad.
Yeah, it can be pretty bad sometimes, right? So what are some of the problems that people like often run into when taking pictures with their phones?
Yeah, so well, it's becoming easier to take pictures. But what's really surprising to a lot of people is the moon is smaller than you think in the sky. Try this with the moon if you can actually see it right now. If you're out there and you're outside or you got the moon through your window, I want you to do a little experiment. What I'd like you to do is hold out your arm at arm's length. I'd like you to stick your thumb out and bring it up to the moon. I want you to notice the size of your outstretched thumb compared to the size of the moon. By the way, my camera is readjusting, so sorry about that.
That's okay.
And what did you notice? Did everybody do it? I'll wait just a second. Man, it seems really big, doesn't it? It seems like it's really big until you compare it to the size of your moon, to the size of your thumb. And your outstretched thumb, it's about 1/4 the diameter of your outstretched thumb, 1/2 of a degree in the sky. So already that makes it a lot harder to take a picture of it because it's surprisingly small in the sky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, you look at it up in the sky, you've got all this emptiness around, and that makes it look really large. But when you see it in a picture and get the full frame, it can look a little bit smaller. Another thing that can happen sometimes is, compared to the really dark sky around it, the moon is really, really bright. Now, fortunately, during a lunar eclipse, especially once we reach totality, it will get a little bit darker, so that might help with taking some of your photography, but that can definitely be a problem, especially with auto adjustments in cameras. So to try and take an image of the moon, especially tonight, I'm sure that's going to be something we'll all want to do. Here are a few different tips you can try out. Now, one really important thing is going to be using something to stabilize your phone. Now, if you have a tripod with a phone adapter, of course that works great, but not everybody has one of those. I know I don't have a phone adapter in particular for one, but you can also try and prop it up on any kind of an object. Find a table or a tree branch. There's all kinds of things you could lean it on, a fence, and that will really help steady your hand, which is really important when taking pictures of such a distant object. Now, the next one I wanted to talk about, I'm going to share my screen here. So phones these days have a lot more settings than they used to have. We've got lots of lenses and different cameras and things on the back, and those are really helpful. Now, one important setting that you can adjust on phones these days is going to be that exposure time. So we were looking at that earlier on Michelle's camera where it was really low, right? Just like 1/1600th of a second, really short exposure. And so this is going to be important to do on your phones as well. So this picture is using an iPhone as an example, but I think like Androids also use a very similar interface these days. While on your camera, you'll just tap anywhere on the screen in your image, and you'll see this small icon of a sun. You can see me highlighting it with my mouse here. If you click and drag that sun, it'll adjust the exposure amount. So what you'll want to do for the moon that's so bright is lower that exposure a lot more. Your phone automatically will have it pretty high because that dark sky around it. So you'll want to make sure to lower it probably all the way down as low as your phone can get. You can see in these images here, this one's just with an example of a lamp where you can really see the difference very strongly. The left one is like the auto settings where you can see it's really trying to pick up some of the things around that bright light, whereas the right, you can see that exposure is adjusted and it keeps from blasting out that image so much. Now, as Michelle mentioned earlier, of course, as well, the moon is pretty small in the sky, and this may tempt you to zoom in as far as your phone allows. Keep zooming and keep zooming. With some newer phones, especially ones that have multiple lenses, they can do an okay job at zooming, but I will warn that some phones don't have the best zoom capabilities. I know mine isn't too fancy, and what happens when you zoom in like that is that it's really just cropping the image rather than actually using a zoom like a big camera where you see the eyepiece extending out. So rather than actually zooming in with the lens and using that feature, try taking it at a few different zoom levels, see which one works best. If you want to crop it later, that might be for the best because sometimes that zoom can downgrade the quality. So one thing I encourage is experiment, try it zoomed in and zoomed out, try it with the different exposures and see which one comes up best. Of course, that's always going to be an important thing is experimentation.
Cool. And your phone may also come with some photo editing software, or maybe you can send the image to your computer where you want to edit it, maybe Photoshop or some other photo editing software package. Whatever you like is fine. And if you have a preference, definitely share that in the chat with so that folks can learn from your experience. That's one thing, especially about a lunar eclipse, is a lot of the pictures that you see have been edited, meaning to bring out the color a little bit. You might see the moon look a little redder than it might appear to your eyes in the sky. Photo editing is as much an art as it is a science. So basically you just keep messing with the photo until you like how it looks, until you think it matches how you saw it in the sky, or maybe you want to bring out some artistic quality in the moon. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to sharing my screen again because I want to point out that the moon's getting a little darker.
Yes, it's
So
changing a lot.
yeah,
Wow.
exactly. So if you have been able to successfully take a picture of the moon, let us know in the chat. You don't have to share the picture. They can't do that, but I want to see if any of you have been able to do that.
Yeah, one thing I am seeing in the chat is I know a couple of folks were talking about how they had a little bit of hazy clouds in the way, but I'm glad that we can have a view for you here. And hopefully the clouds will clear by the time we reach totality in everybody's areas.
Yep, and I just had a thin cloud go over the moon, but it didn't affect how it appeared, because I think it actually kind of looks like a spread out airplane contrail. So I think that's what
Well,
that
I
was.
mean, fortunately, the nice thing with looking at the moon is that it is so big and bright in the sky that even through some little hazy clouds, you can often see it. It might be a little tougher once we reach the eclipse, but
Exactly, exactly. So anyway, in just a little bit, we'll talk about what a lunar eclipse is. Hunter had made a really snazzy little video that we're going to show you in just a little bit, but I want to concentrate on the image for a little while. So, Hunter, how are we doing with questions? How are folks doing? How are folks feeling? What do you think?
we had one other question come in when we were discussing the camera features, and this is one that haven't had experience with, but maybe you have, Michelle. Somebody was saying that they have a Google Pixel with the astrophotography feature, and if there was any tips for anyone familiar with this feature. So I know this is something that's pretty common on newer cell phones these days, is like a night sky photography mode. I haven't used those before. Have you tried any of them out before, Michelle?
Yeah, I've got an iPhone, so I haven't used Google Pixel specifically. But again, as Hunter mentioned, a lot of the cameras are getting better, the software is getting better, the amount of lenses you have to choose from is getting better, the zoom capability is getting better, and so the ability to adjust the settings to be able to take longer exposure pictures is getting better. The problem with the moon that you're going to possibly experience is if you take a picture for a second or two or three, which you, with these newer phones and the newer software that's just coming with the camera, you can take a 1 second, a 5 second picture. The problem is the moon is already pretty bright, so your
Mhm.
problem will not necessarily be getting more light into your camera. It might actually be getting less light into your camera, but taking pictures of the night sky without the moon. So what I'm looking at up in the sky right now, I can see Orion right here. So it's up to my left. So if you're looking out at the moon right now and you're outside, look basically to the left if you're in the northern hemisphere, and I see Orion about halfway up in the sky. The farther north you are, he'll be a little lower. The farther south you are, he'll be a little bit higher. But Orion is visible, but in order to take pictures of the stars in Orion, then I may have to increase the amount of time the shutter is open, so to speak, in my phone camera. So that's where it might be useful. But for something like the moon, stopping down the amount of light might be more along the lines of what you're going to need to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point because yeah, those night sky features are usually allowing you to do those long exposures, bringing out some of the dimmer objects in the sky. But the moon's so bright, yeah, you'll really run into the opposite problem with a phone, making sure you get as short of an exposure as possible.
Exactly. And the other problem that we're all going to see is and you're going to see me fiddling with settings from time to time as the moon gets farther into the dark part of the Earth's shadow, because that's what a lunar eclipse is. The moon encountering Earth's shadow, there's going to be quite a contrast between the lit part of the moon
Mhm.
and the dark part of the moon. Now, the lit part of the moon is currently within the Earth's shadow also. There's two parts of the Earth's shadow, the lighter outer part called the penumbra and the darker inner part called the umbra. Right now, you could be forgiven for looking up at the moon and going, I don't see any difference on the lit part. That's okay. The penumbra isn't that dark. The contrast is really when you start to see it with the dark part of the shadow. So yeah, it's going to be some fiddling with settings to be able to get this right or close to right, as the moon at the contrast is more with the dark part and the lit part.
Yeah, but that contrast between the two parts creates one of my favorite moments, I think, of a lunar eclipse, which is when it finally switches over. You've got that little bright sliver that's there, and then all of it enters the shadow and really reveals the whole thing. I mean, that's such an exciting moment, right?
Exactly. And you can see me, I switched over to the screen where you can see where I've got the camera settings. So I'm just messing with them just to see what I can see and if any of the settings are making the view any better. And actually this looks pretty good. Um, I can see the curved part of the shadow, of course, caused by the curvature of the Earth. You are seeing the proof the Earth is round by seeing the curved part of the Earth's shadow. during a lunar eclipse. This is one way the ancient Greeks and other folks knew the Earth was round, is the curved part of the Earth's shadow on the moon during a lunar eclipse. So that's a cool thing right there. And I'm seeing the dark part of the moon. I'm so excited to see what color we get. We're going to talk a little bit later about the color of totality, and we won't know what we're going to get till we see it. So that's going
I
to be
know,
exciting.
exciting.
So all
Keeps us on our
right.
toes every time, right?
It does. And my toes are currently off the ground because it's chilly out here. So I am currently not on my toes. All right. How we doing with questions?
Oh, good question. Let me check, see if we've had any new ones come in. Doesn't look like we have any new questions coming in, but we've got more people joining from different places.
Nice. For
We've
those who
got
are
some
just
people with views of the eclipses tonight as well.
cool. For those who are just joining us, tell us where you're joining from. We would love to know that. We'd love to see that in the chat. We know you're not all in the Chicago area. So we had New Zealand and Japan and Washington State and California and the Chicago area. Where else? Who else is seeing this eclipse?
See, somebody's joining from Assam right now. I know. Let me see what other neighborhoods we got. We got some more from around here. Oh, here's a Kenosha, Wisconsin. How nice.
Hello.
Genoa, Illinois. People from all over. We've even got some folks that have come to the museum before and looked through the observatory telescope, which is exciting.
Hey,
This is not their
fantastic.
first opportunity observing with the Adler.
That is awesome. And for those who, I'm sharing my entire screen. So if you're seeing Hunter here, I'm moving the window over here just to get it out of the way, the settings, so you can see the settings on the camera a little bit better. But I'm trying to keep this in view. What I have to do is move the camera from time to time just to keep it. It's an electronic zoom. So this is actually how the moon appears, which is another
Proves
great
our
illustration.
point from earlier,
Yeah,
yeah, about how
exactly.
small it really is in the sky.
Exactly. If you're wondering, how am I getting such a large view of the moon when we just said it's tiny? Um, it's an electronic zoom feature on the camera. So we're doing a little electronic cheating, I guess you could say. So I just double click on that, and then I can even click where it says 200%. Whoops, hang on. That was a little bit a little big there. So I'm going to move this down because let's see, zoom is covering up, the controls are covering up where I go to click to move the camera. Anyway, I click the 200%, we can see it even bigger, but that doesn't mean that the view is better. So what we're doing is we're just taking the same amount of light and we're spreading it out. So the resolution of the camera is fixed. I can't make it any more detailed than it is. So when I click this 200%, it's going to look a little blurry. That happens with telescope eyepieces too. You're gonna expand the view, but you might make it appear a little bit blurry as well. So that's pretty normal. And I'm gonna reach over and just check the focus real quick. So I'm reaching to the front of the camera and I'm turning the focus. How's that look, Hunter? What do you think? Pretty good?
Yeah, it looks pretty good on my screen here.
Alrighty, cool.
Sorry to hear about the rain that's coming down in Santa Clara right now, folks, but I'm glad that we could provide you a view from Chicago here today. Not usually the place that you would have clear views in November, but I'm glad that we got lucky this time around.
Well,
Folks from North Carolina,
we know
Bloomington,
California.
Indiana,
We know
the location of my alma mater.
California needs the rain, so that's a good thing. So
There you go, true.
keep on rain in Santa Clara. That's good. You need it. Hey, Hunter, your hometown. That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah. So one thing that I saw Colleen posted in the chat for us was a link to a website to see if everybody could view the eclipse in their location. And while we've got this partial eclipse starting and before we get to totality, I think it would be great to share with folks how they can see this tonight, check and see if it's going to be visible in their area and what times these different things is going to happen. I think it would be a good time to share that to make sure everybody can go out and do some observing of their own if there's clear weather there.
Exactly. That sounds like a great idea. Let's do that.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull up a screen share of a website called timeanddate.com. So Colleen just a minute ago posted a link to this website, and the one that she posted actually goes straight to this eclipse tonight. But I'm starting here on the home page just to make sure I can give everybody a complete view of how to find things. So we're going to use this to pull up a visibility map for the eclipse tonight. So you'll see here on the time page, we've got this little sun and moon drop down here at the top. We'll go here to eclipses. And we'll see that the first one on the list is the one that we're experiencing right now, the November 7th to 8th one. I'm going to select that. And if you go to this page and the website is able to get like where your location is, you'll see right here at the top, is this total lunar eclipse visible in, and then whatever city you're in. For me right now, it says Chicago because it knows where I am today. But I'll actually start from down here with this map. So we'll see that we can get a full detailed map of exactly where the eclipse is going to be visible tonight. So we can see our little key down here, which is indicating kind of how this map is laid out with the different colors. So everything here in the dark red is going to be places where the entire eclipse is visible. All of the partial eclipse from start to finish, that moon will be up all night, including we can see a lot of the Western United States. And then as you get to like the fainter red colors, you're seeing a little bit less of the eclipse, but still a lot. You can see that we're here in the sort of third tier of colors in Chicago. And that means that we can see all of the total eclipse, but not all of that partial eclipse. So I'll put in my location and you'll see how that'll show up. It'll put a little pin there for you. Now, when we get over into some of these areas, once we get into the blue parts, those are places that aren't seeing this lunar eclipse this time around. But of course, there's lots more lunar eclipse in the future, and this website will show you any of them that are visible in your area. Now, if I go to my location that I have here on the map, and I select see animation of how it will look, it'll take me to a page that'll really break down a ton of information about the eclipse, specifically in my area. So this is going to be a really helpful tool for all of you today. So the first thing that we'll see is we'll see a little animation of how the eclipse will look. We can see that this is lining up pretty well with what we were seeing through Michelle's camera earlier. And as you scroll through, you'll see that it will continue going through these different phases of the eclipse. So if we go through here, we see the entirety of the partial reaching totality. So that'll show you right when the full eclipse starts, where the maximum will be for your area, and when totality will end. So that white ring that you see there, right along the outside of the moon, is actually the shadow of the Earth, exactly where that's projecting. If you scroll down below that, you'll see really good breakdowns of the times that different things are happening throughout this eclipse in your location. So we can see that right now we're sort of in between this partial eclipse beginning and the total eclipse beginning at 4:15. And one other thing you'll see here is the direction and the altitude that the moon will be at. So that'll be really important because one thing that we're seeing tonight here in Chicago, at least, is that it's pretty low in the sky as it's setting. So it's important to know where it's going to be to make sure you're getting in a good location where you'll get some good visibility of it. Now, sometimes it can be hard to like think about the altitude and directions when looking at these things. Michelle, do you have any tips for how we can use this to find where it's going to be in the sky?
I sure do. So what I want you to do is another experiment using your hands, and I want you to make a fist, and I want you to extend your arm out completely so your arm is straight. With your arm fully extended in front of you, your fist from top to bottom held out at arm's length is about 10 degrees of sky. You can use half a fist for 5 degrees, 2 fists for 20 degrees, and so on. And then you would just use the information in the altitude section of this screen right here to be able to know how far up in the sky you should look. So you can translate that number to a number of fists. So where the moon is right now is somewhere around 30 degrees up here where I'm seeing it in the Chicago suburbs. So what you do is you take your fist, one of them, doesn't matter which one, put the bottom of your fist on the horizon, and then up, that's 20 degrees, up, that's 30 degrees, and where I'm seeing right here, the moon it's a little bit higher than 30 degrees, so just a little bit higher, which matches exactly where the moon is in the sky right now, according to the time and date site.
Yeah, now it's really important to point out that what you're seeing here on our screen share is just the Chicago specific times and directions. Make sure to look this up for your area if you want to make sure you're looking the right way in the sky for where you are, because it'll be very different, especially when we have viewers all the way on the other side of the world in New Zealand. We'll have really different views tonight. So make
Exactly.
sure to look it up for your area. And I know Colleen posted that link in the chat for you to do that.
Yep. And so there, the other column is showing you direction. And what the direction is showing you is what direction you should be facing to see the moon. So we're going to use the same information for your fists if you want to, but actually it's pretty easy. North in the direction label here is 0 degrees. East is 90 degrees. South is 180 degrees. West is 270 degrees. So again, we take a look at where the moon will be at when totality starts here in the central time zone at 4:16 a.m. It will be at 270 degrees in direction. We call that azimuth, and that means it'll be due west, about 24 degrees up, so 2.5 fists up above the horizon. And due west. So there you go. That's how you can use that information. And again, like Hunter said, your circumstances will be a little bit different depending on where you, or a lot different, depending on where you are and what time zone you're in.
All right, well, that's great. I'm glad that we got that out there before we reach totality, because I did want to make sure, of course, while we love observing with you, that you all get to see the eclipse with your own eyes too in person today.
Exactly. So I've got the moon again. So we've gone a little farther. So let me move it over here. And I'm gonna share my screen so you can see some of the settings as well. Let me bring that up. There we go. There we go. I've got a little tiny cloud in front of it, but actually that's helping me a little bit. It's toning down the brightness of the bright part of the moon just a bit. I can't yet see color on the in the totality portion, the dark part of the shadow. But we'll see what we get when that happens. So there we go. How are we doing with questions?
Good. You know, I love seeing after we take a break away for a few minutes, coming back and being able to see how much of a difference we're seeing in the moon there. It's really a good chunk taken out of it now in that shadow, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
So
And
one thing that we're talking about in the chat a little bit, and you just kind of mentioned seeing the color on it. So somebody was wondering about, like, is it true that the universe doesn't have colors, or about like how colors are represented out in space? So I know Geza was answering this a little bit, but what should we expect to see like when looking at the moon tonight, Michelle?
well, that's the fun part. We don't know what we're gonna get till we see it. So the color of a lunar eclipse depends on quite a few things. And so what's happening during the eclipse is the sun is shining on the earth, and the earth is casting a shadow into space. The moon passes within the shadow if its orbit lines up with the shadow. It doesn't usually, but sometimes it does, and that's when we get a lunar eclipse. But what's happening when the sunlight is shining on the earth, the sun is shining through the atmosphere that's around the edge of the earth at that exact time. And that atmosphere scatters away the bluer colors of light, leaving you the redder colors. This is exactly what happens when the sun gets really close to the horizon, almost about to sunset. You're looking through so much air at that point that the air is scattering away the blue light, giving you the red colors, or red or orange colors, making the sun look more orange or red than it really is. And so when we have a lunar eclipse, again, sunlight shining through the atmosphere, the bluer colors are scattered away by our air, leaving us the redder colors. However, the color of the lunar eclipse can also depend on the clarity of the air that the sunlight is passing through. How cloudy is it? How clear is it? Has there been a sandstorm, a dust storm, a large volcanic eruption? The lunar eclipse on May 15th, earlier this year, was really dark red. I would say like a dark brick red color. And the reason for that was there was a very large volcanic eruption in Tonga earlier in the year, back at the beginning part of the year. And that threw so much volcanic dust and other materials into the air that also scattered away a lot of blue light, leaving the lunar eclipse looking very dark. And that was really amazing to see. But it isn't always red. It could be a gray. It could be orange. And there's actually something that we can show you to determine what range of color that you've got for the lunar eclipse as it's visible. So Hunter, do you want to show folks the Danjon scale?
Yeah, I'll pull up this image here. So this is a really good way to exemplify like how different two lunar eclipses can be. So these different shades that we get with lunar eclipses sometimes can be represented with something called a Danjon scale. You can see that I have that here on the bottom of the slide. And this measures the appearance of an eclipse on a range of numbers from 0 to 4, with 0 being the darkest, dimmest eclipses and 4 being those really bright ones. So these two images that I'm sharing right now show two total lunar eclipses that both occurred in the same year. You can see just a few months apart in 2003. And these were roughly considered about 2 and 4 on the scale. So we can see the one on the right, really brilliantly orange. You can even see a little bit of the bright white along the bottom there, where it's, it has reached totality, but it's such a bright image that some of the natural color of the moon is still coming through. Whereas on the left, you can see it's a totally different experience there. Now, this is only a 2. It can go all the way down to a 0, where it's very dim and dark, almost impossible to see even at that level. So it can look really, really different depending on the circumstances. Now, one important thing to note is that this scale is very subjective, and it's based on kind of the individual observer. So everybody's observing experiences might be different depending on their location. So it's an easy way to help kind of represent the experience that you have while viewing an eclipse. It might not line up with the view that we have through the camera tonight, especially if you're joining us from a very different area of the world. So I'm excited to see how this one appears tonight, and hopefully some folks in the chat, once we reach totality, can let us know where do they think their view of the eclipse fell on the scale.
Exactly. So yeah, let us know as you start to see the color. What color are you seeing? Are you seeing brick red? Are you seeing bright red? Are you seeing orange? Are you seeing a yellowy color? What color do you see? So we will find out. So totality starts in a little over half an hour. So we're getting closer. And let me go back to showing the view. Again, I've got just a really thin cloud that's going in front of the moon, but nothing that's blocking it. There we go. There it is. And again, I'm going to reach over and check the focus. So I need to turn my screen so I can see it while I'm doing this. And so I'm reaching over. You're actually seeing the camera wiggle because I'm touching it. And I'm
So
just
we'll see right
adjusting.
now, we can really see the very clear shadow that the moon is going underneath. Right now, we've got that really bright portion that's still lit semi-directly by the sun. It hasn't entered the full umbra of the Earth's shadow yet. So it's really bright and is kind of, making it difficult to see the rest of the moon, right? The contrast is really strong. That section's really bright. Now, as that part gets smaller and smaller, we'll start to see the rest of the moon begin to reveal itself. We'll be able to tweak those camera settings to make sure that we can see those bright red colors that we were seeing in those images. We won't get those yet until we reach the more totality.
So when we started the show, the shutter speed was set to about it was around 1/2000th of a second, or a little bit less than one, or right around 1/2000th of a second, and an f setting of f7.1. I currently have the shutter speed set to 1/1000th of a second, so a little bit, tiny bit longer shutter speed. And an F setting that's a little bit lower, meaning it's letting in a little bit more light. Now, if I adjust this really out of whack, so if I go, oops, wrong way, you'll see the bright part of the moon get really washed out, but you'll start to see the rest of it. See that?
Oh yeah, there it comes. You can really see it coming through. Once the bright part is like a solid white, you can start to see it come through.
Exactly, but it also shows you the incredible ability of the human eye to show you both parts of the moon at the same time. And You'll also see a little bit of the really light thin cloud that's right around the moon right now. But again, nothing that's really going to affect us. So I'm gonna, whoops, see that? So I'm starting to see a little tiny bit of color in that dark part. So I'm gonna go back and show the view as we had it before. There we go. Going back to about, there it is, back to about 1/1000th of a second. Actually, I'm going to go to about 1/800th of a second. There you go.
Yeah, you can really see as you were going from that longer exposure to the shorter one, it really reveal like how far the shadows made it so far.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's a plane going overhead. I don't think it'll pass in front of the moon, but you might hear it on my microphone.
I love what we're seeing in the chat right now. Somebody said, I'm outside right now looking at the lunar eclipse. It's amazing. That's what we love to hear.
Nice.
Glad to hear that other folks are observing, sharing some of the times that the totality will be starting in different countries around the world. We've got Malaysia and the Philippines joining us today.
That is awesome. Just remember, we are all looking up at the moon at exactly the same time. We are all sharing the same experience over vast areas of this planet. And those of you who might be in areas where you can't see it right now, thank you for joining us, because you're part of our sky community as well. So you may not be able to see it with your eyes, but you're part of our online community here in Sky Observers Hangout. And so this is why we love doing this show live at an amazingly early time in the morning in Chicago. But this is why we do it, because we do it to bring you all together to interact with us and with each other. So keep those questions coming. Keep those questions. I know Geza, our astronomer friend Geza, is in the chat answering questions. So again, for those who are just joining us, the little blue wrench, if you see Geza's name, he is our astronomer in the background answering questions from folks. And then if you see the Adler Planetarium's name in yellow, that is our chat moderator, Colleen. She's keeping an eye on everyone for us, and she's feeding us questions from the chat so we can answer your questions as well. So feel free to interact with us and with each other. So Hunter, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great here. I did see one other question that came through in the chat. Now, I know we've got folks joining from all over the world, but this is a question that we might be better suited to answer. It's where is the best area in Chicago to watch for the lunar eclipse tonight?
Oh, excellent. Excellent question. So basically, as the moon progresses through the eclipse, as the moon passes into the darkest part of the Earth's shadow, here in the Chicago area, it's going to get lower and lower in the sky. So that means wherever you are in Chicago, you're going to need a view pretty much, if you want to see the whole thing as we see it here, through totality and to the end, because the moon is going to set during the final stage of the partial phase of the eclipse, so we won't see quite the whole thing, but close enough. You're going to need a view pretty much down to the horizon. So if you have a lot of big buildings, trees, houses nearby, you're going to have to find a spot that has a view to the west and northwest. So lower in the sky, west and northwest. If you've got a nearby safe parking lot that you can hang out at, like if there's a big box store that's open 24 hours or something, that might be a nice place to go, because usually the big parking lots are wide open spaces. And you know, in this case, having all those lights really doesn't matter all that much. You may want to put those lights to your back. Don't look directly at them. But the moon is bright enough that it might not make that big of a difference. So you need to find a spot that's got a view that's clear to the west and northwest, and then down to the horizon as far as you can go. Parks in Chicago are not open, I believe, until sunrise, I think. Don't totally quote me on that. So parks may not be the best place to go, just because Chicago parks close at 11 p.m. So this is where the wider open spaces, like the parking lots, might be a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely. I know it can be tough to view them here in the city when you got lots of buildings in the way, especially when they're this low in the sky. But folks in other places of the world might have a nice, easy experience straight above them. That'll definitely be the case in some areas.
Yep, yep. So we're getting a little farther here. I'm gonna adjust the settings again a little bit just to show that darker part of the moon. So give me a second. Here we go. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. So what I'm doing is adjusting the shutter speed to about,
Yeah,
I've
start
got
to
it at,
reveal that
yep,
side under the shadow.
yeah, I've got it at about 1/15th of a second. When I showed it before, I was at about 1/25th of a second. So already I'm noticing I have to adjust the settings even from just a few minutes ago to be able to see it.
No, I must say that's a pretty remarkable difference to what the ideal setting was when we were looking at the moon, the bright portion of the moon. Still, I mean,
That's right.
a significant number.
When Hunter and I first signed on to Zoom before we started the stream, before the eclipse started, I had the settings at 1/4000th of a second. And we are definitely not at that to be able to show detail on the lit part of the moon. So let me go back to where I can show detail on the lit part. Hang on, there we go. So say right about there, matches what I see in the sky pretty well. I'm at 1/800th of a second. I find it hilarious that my watch is telling me to stand up right now. I have to tell my watch, no, I'm not standing up. I need to stay right here so I can show you the moon.
I
All
know
right.
Geza answered this question in the chat already, but just to make sure that everybody hears it, somebody was asking how long until we reach totality. And so we've got just about 30 minutes left, a little under half an hour until we'll get to totality.
Yep, 24 minutes till, or sorry, 26 minutes till totality starts. So we're getting there. So in the Chicago area, it's 4:16 p.m. in the Eastern time zone in the US. It's 5:16, sorry, did I say p.m.? a.m. Oh my goodness, it's early, 4:16 a.m. Central, 5:16 a.m. Eastern, 3:16 a.m. Mountain, 2:16 a.m. Pacific. And then wherever you are in the world, if you've got the moon up in your sky, it's then whatever the time is, your local time. But we are all seeing the moon as it is right now. We are all seeing the moon exactly the same way right now. So with this amount of dark part of the shadow.
One person was asking in the chat about if there were certain kinds of conditions in their area, if they would be able to see it. They were asking about thunderstorms in particular, but I'll use it kind of as a jumping off point to talk about a few things. So
Yeah.
definitely something like a thunderstorm where you're going to have really thick clouds. It'll be tough to see through those clouds. If you have some thin ones, especially high clouds, you'll probably be able to see through them a little bit. It will get tougher as the moon dims down. When it's really nice and bright, it's pretty easy to see it through the clouds. But once we reach totality, you definitely will want clear skies to be able to see it well. And I'm glad that we can be here providing those clear skies, even if you don't have them where you are today.
And another thing is also, if you have thunderstorms in your area, please be safe. Please use your best judgment in terms of whether it's safe to go out and actually view the moon where you are. And I have an audience. I'm here at my brother-in-law and sister-in-law's house in their backyard because they have a clear view of the moon. And so it just brought me coffee or
Oh, how
tea.
nice
It brought
of
me
them.
tea.
How nice
So,
of them.
oh, Earl Grey latte. Oh my goodness. This is so amazing. Nice and warm. So yes, it is. What is the temperature in the backyard here? It's chilly. So this is just showing you that this show really is live. It is currently, I'm bringing up the Weather Channel app right here. Of course, it's going slow. It's 42 degrees right now where I am.
Little chilly, yep, but of course, when it comes to sky observing, sometimes you have to put up with some cold weather. The conditions we're usually worried about are clouds more than the cold.
Exactly. But yeah, for the person with the thunderstorms, you might get some clear spaces, but be careful. Be careful. Lightning can travel pretty far from a cloud, from a thunderstorm, up to, I think, at least 10 miles away. So just be really careful if you have active storms happening where you are right now.
We had some folks in the chat saying, how nice of them. I'm assuming that's referring to your brother and sister-in-law.
Yes.
I agree. That was very sweet of them. And we've also got some folks joining from some fun places. We've got some, they've got a live view of the lunar eclipse at the Delta College Planetarium in Bay City, Michigan. So that's exciting to hear.
Hello, Delta College Planetarium from the Adler Planetarium. Great to see you, or great to see you in the chat. Fantastic for you to join us. I'm curious, Delta College Planetarium, how many folks do you have at the planetarium right now? What tell us about your event in the chat.
Yeah, we'll have to see if they let us know. And then somebody brought up an interesting question. Again, another one that I know Gay's answer, but I think it's a good jumping off point for a conversation. So somebody asked, when will the eclipse reach its peak? So this is kind of interesting. You know, we'll be in totality for an extended period of time where it will be fully in that umbral shadow, but there is technically a peak to the eclipse. It would be called like the maximum eclipse point. I think here in Chicago, that's just before 5 o'clock in the morning CST. So about, maybe 45 minutes after we first go into it. But again, time and date does a really good job of providing that information for your location too. So what exactly does that maximum eclipse mean?
Actually, Hunter, can you share the time and date screen with?
Yeah, I can pull that back up here. Absolutely.
With that little clip. So that window. So you showed where the map was, which was great. But right above that, there's a great window. So you see that? So why don't you hit where it says live? Hit that. There you go. So what time and date does is you can have it follow the eclipse based on where it actually is, what it really looks like in the sky. And so this is the amount of the moon that's within the dark part of the shadow, and you can see the part that's not fully within the dark part of the shadow. But are you able to talk folks through if you want to go back in time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start here all the way back at the beginning. We can see this is when that first initial, like very faint period starts as it's playing through here. And then here it starts to get darker, but not very visible. And you see that second circle coming in, which is really the main part of the shadow of the Earth. So this is when the partial eclipse is starting. This is what we've been watching since we went live, right? Getting to the point that we are right now, right around here. And soon we'll reach totality when it fully enters that shadow. Now, this is when the full eclipse will start, but as we progress along a little bit more, we'll see that we'll reach a point here that's the maximum eclipse. And I'll take a second to pause here because this is what our question was about. This is the point when the moon is most fully within the shadow. So on a different lunar eclipse, it might be more right in the middle. This time around, you can see we're getting here pretty far into the shadow of the Earth. But this maximum eclipse is when it's deepest into the shadow. You can see we've got this nice long amount here that it is inside the shadow. And then as it progresses, we'll see that it'll continue in totality until the totality of the lunar eclipse ends, and then it goes back to a partial as the bright part is revealed again. So hopefully that helps answer that question. We can see the exact time for the maximum eclipse, which here in Chicago is right around 4:59 a.m., but that'll be, of course, different for your time zone. And that sort of helps give us an idea of what that maximum eclipse means.
Fantastic. Thank you. And while you were doing that, I took the opportunity to change the battery on my camera.
Good timing.
And I just have to check and see. So you might be hearing the little noises that the camera makes. I need to check and make sure that I actually picked up the correct battery.
No worries.
Meaning, did I set it down and then immediately got it mixed up with the other one. So I'm going to start up the software, which you can't see, so don't worry, you can't see it.
No worries.
I got the camera turned on and I'm just talking it through it. There we go. Yes, I did. Okay.
I see that some folks that are observing outside right now are saying that with the naked eye, they're starting to be able to see some of that red color on the lunar eclipse here in Chicago, which is exciting. Somebody else was asking, is the totality of this eclipse longer than usual and why? So that's a great question. So each lunar eclipse is not going to be exactly the same, right? We talked about the colors earlier, and that is also going to include with how long it lasts. So you saw that it was kind of moving getting in and out of the Earth's shadow. There are some times where it doesn't even reach totality. We'll just have a partial lunar eclipse. It really just depends on how the Earth, the sun, and the moon are all lining up. And actually, while Michelle's getting set up, I can play a quick video here that I recorded that kind of helps explain how these eclipses are happening, how all the objects are lining up, and maybe that'll help give you an idea of like why sometimes it's longer, sometimes it doesn't reach totality, all that kind of stuff. Does that sound like a good idea, Michelle?
Go for it.
All righty. Let me pull that up really quick, and then I'll probably mute myself here.
We've got a lunar eclipse coming up, and you might be wondering, how do eclipses like this happen? Let's take a look. To better understand eclipses, let's recreate a mini one. This blue ball will represent the Earth, and this will represent the moon. Let's cut the lights and turn on our model of the sun. As the moon orbits around the Earth, we see its different phases. And when it is opposite the sun, it usually has all of its light shining on it, revealing a full moon. But sometimes its orbit lines up perfectly in syzygy.
Whoa, what was that funny sounding word? Syzygy is a term used to describe when three celestial objects are arranged in a straight line.
But sometimes its orbit lines up perfectly in syzygy. When this happens, the moon is plunged into the darkness of the Earth's shadow, becoming a lunar eclipse.
So that helps give you an idea. You can see that, the moon is always orbiting around us, of course, but not every time does it fall into the darkness of the shadow, right? That lunar eclipse. So it really just depends on exactly how much they line up, how perfectly that line is. So it can really change what each different lunar eclipse is like.
Exactly. So yeah, and the amount of time depends on what the path of the moon is through the shadow. So if it just clips if it gets fully within the shadow, but it just clips the edge of the shadow, then the totality portion won't be that long. If it goes through the middle of the shadow, then you'll get a longer lunar eclipse. I actually don't know how this one compares to others. Hopefully Geza can look that up. But honestly, the length, if it's a few seconds longer than another one, if a few minutes longer, I mean, it won't really make that much difference. I don't know how this one stacks up with the rest, but anyway, there we go. So I've got the camera back running. So let me go back to.
I like this observation in the chat. They said that syzygy is either the best or the worst Scrabble word. If you get all of those letters at once, I'm so sorry for you, but I'm glad that you at least know a word that you can use with those now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Let me share my screen. Give me a second. There we go. Well, actually, I'm going to share the different window. Again, I'm going to go back to showing how the moon really does look to the camera. And it's pretty small. So
yeah, wow, look at it there in the sky.
So I've got a tripod, so I'm tilting the camera down, and then I'm locking it so it doesn't move, and then I'm physically just turning the tripod. There we go. And this square is the electronic zoom. So I'm double clicking on that to be able to show, where the moon is. And hang on, I want to make sure that I've got this lined up so I can show you the correct, whoops. And I know it's really laid out because I'm pressing the wrong buttons. There we go. Here we go.
Oh, good question here in the chat. So when does the red happen? So we're getting really close, right? We're seeing that we've just got a little bit of a sliver left of that bright portion of the moon that still, hasn't made it under the shadow yet. Once that portion completely goes into the shadow as well, we reach totality. At that point, we can really change the camera settings. You can see like Michelle's doing right now. To help reveal that dim part of the moon. You can see right now when we are revealing that red color, you can see a little bit of it there on the camera right now, but that part that's still bright is so blinding. So it makes it a little tougher to see. So once all of that is in the shadow, we'll really get a nice view of that full eclipsed moon.
Exactly. So when I'm looking up and I have to block the ring light, I'm not quite I can't tell yet what color we're going to get. It looks a little bit more orangey, maybe, than the one in
We'll
May.
have to see.
Yeah, so not quite as dark. And one thing I also saw, by the way, for those of you who are out right now, you might get a chance to see a meteor or two. The Orionid meteor shower is happening right now. So if you see any bright streaks in the sky streaming away from the constellation Orion, or if you trace back the trails and they go if you trace them back and they start somewhere near Orion and they go outward, that's the Orionid meteor shower. And so, yeah, that's happening right now. So I saw one as I was getting everything set up at about 2 o'clock this morning. So I don't know if we'll actually, I doubt we'll see one in front of the moon. That would be quite an amazing feat if we actually pulled that off. So anyway.
So I saw someone in the chat was asking about like settings for their camera. They were using a DSLR as well. Of course, always make sure to experiment, but I will say that you can see the settings that Michelle is using here. So if you want an idea of what it might look like, you can see that we've got all of those lined up there on the screen.
Exactly.
We're also seeing a few folks in the chat talking about the cloud coverage in their area. And now, of course, talking about clouds is almost as present as talking about space. For astronomers, I think, because they can be such a perturbance sometimes. We've got some folks saying they've got light cloud cover, but one person said their clouds are clearing up and they could see it. And one thing that's great about a lunar eclipse is that it lasts a pretty long time, right? Like we'll be in totality for quite a good period of time, over an hour that we'll have that total lunar eclipse occurring. So I hope for everyone that has a little bit of clouds in the way that maybe some of those will move before it ends here this morning or in the evening for you.
For the person who was asking about DSLR settings, one of the other things that you should make sure you set your camera to is either M for manual, or you might see B for bulb, either one. It depends on your camera and what they use on the little dial, probably on the top of the camera. But you want to set it to manual settings so you can adjust the settings. Otherwise, your camera is probably going to do all the adjusting itself, and it may not show you exactly what you want to see. It may over adjust one way or the other. So on the manual settings, this is automatic white balance. So I just let that go. This is this part here at the bottom where my cursor is, where it says the L and it has a little quarter of a circle. That's just the file size. So if I wanted to take a picture, which I can do by just pressing that button right there, and so it's recorded in the camera, and then for what I've got it on the screen right now, I don't have the resolution on my screen to show the picture, but that's fine. It's okay. We don't need to see it. But the hang on, let me go back to the settings. Hang on. There. So the shutter speed is set to 1/13 of a second. So again, we're getting longer exposure times as the moon is getting darker. We've got an F of 5, so that is the amount of light the camera is letting in. So the shutter speed is how long the shutter of the camera is letting in light. The F number is essentially the amount of light the camera lets in. The lower the number, the more light the camera lets in. That's from film days. And this ISO, this speed here is also essentially having to deal with brightness. So yeah, those are my camera settings right here that I've got, and we are getting closer. It's looking really pretty. But yeah, definitely dark. And again, I'm gonna mess with the focus just a tiny bit.
So we've got a couple of questions that came into the chat. One of them was about, I saw a couple of folks asking about how does the moon change its colors? Why does it become that red color? And so what we're seeing is a really good comparison is think about a sunset or a sunrise. Usually when the sun's up in the sky, right, like it's very brilliantly white, maybe a little bit yellow, but mostly just like very bright white up in the sky. But as the sun is rising and setting, you get all sorts of very different colors, right? Especially along the horizon, those bright reds. And that's because that light is passing through the atmosphere. And so in this situation, the same thing is happening with the sun's light. We're essentially seeing the light of every sunset and sunrise on the whole Earth right now being projected onto the moon. It's not getting that direct light anymore because it's in the Earth's shadow. So all it gets is that light affected by the Earth's atmosphere. So that is what is changing that red color.
Exactly. And so that color has to do with not anything with the moon. The moon just reflects light. It has to do with the Earth's air, and the shade of color that we see depends on the clarity of the air. And is it cloudy, clear, dusty? Are there big storms? Has there been a recent volcanic eruption? There's all sorts of things that can affect what we actually see for the color. And the way I'm seeing it, this is looking to be a little more orangey of an eclipse than we saw in May. So in May, there was a large volcanic eruption that happened in Tonga earlier in the year, so the beginning part of the year. But there was so much stuff up in the atmosphere that affected the color of the lunar eclipse that we saw in May, even though I think the eruption was in like January or February. It still had a big effect. Well, it's taken time, but some of that stuff has come out of the atmosphere since then. And so I don't think this eclipse is going to be quite as dark as we had for that particular one, but we'll see. We're getting really close. It's really pretty. So I hope you're all
One
seeing
thing
it.
I
Really.
like that you mentioned is that, right, the moon doesn't produce its own light. It's rather just reflecting the light that's coming from the sun. And so one question that was asked in the chat is, would the red color be visible if you can't see the moon itself because of clouds, but you can see some of the moon light? Now, what's happening here with the lunar eclipses, you can see here, especially like where we've had to change our settings, is that the bright part of the moon, the part that would usually be creating that moonlight, that kind of glow you get at night, is really, really bright. Rather than seeing this red light reflected back off the moon, you would probably instead see just a dimming. It would get darker around you if you were sitting outside because there's less of that light being reflected. But the red light that's coming off is probably not bright enough to change the color of the sky like a sunset would.
Yeah, and also if you're trying to see it through thicker clouds, you just have less light to go through those clouds. So that might make it kind of hard to see. So yeah, if you're trying to see it through clouds, the amount of cloud cover may affect how much of the eclipse you see or how bright it is, because there's just physically less light falling on the moon to be able to light it up. So yeah, and I'm just I've got the moon directly in front of me right here, which is really cool. I just keep saying that. I know I keep saying that, but these are some of these times where you're just kind of at a loss for words, right? It's the English language sometimes fails me in terms of being able to describe adequately.
Well,
My other
fortunately,
problem,
we don't have to just use language. We can use the beautiful image you're capturing here today.
Exactly.
And hopefully you all are experiencing the same sense of wonder, looking up at it from where you're joining from.
And where else are folks joining us from? I'm seeing lots of chat messages go by. I can't keep up with it. I know Colleen is doing a great job behind the scenes doing that, and Gaze is doing a bang up job answering your questions behind the scenes, and Hunter's picking out questions for us to talk about. So where else? I think I saw someone is in the Chicago Loop. Well, if you're in the loop, you may have to find like an opening between some buildings to be able to see.
It's true. It is very straight west, so you still might be able to see through in between some of the tall buildings. One observation that I like here is that somebody was observing from Houston, and they noticed looks the same as we're seeing here right now, which I think is a good sign. It should be the same for all of us. We should have very similar views in the sky right now, which is exciting.
Exactly. We all should have the same view. The color will pretty much be the same for everybody. What might affect it is just some very local circumstances, light pollution, whether you've got a bright light nearby, that sort of thing. That might affect it. But we all should be seeing a pretty similar color right here, because it has to do with the sun's light shining through the edge of the Earth's atmosphere, or the atmosphere of the Earth at the edge right now. And so we're all seeing it as it appears to everybody else, which you can't always say that every single person watching the moon is getting the same experience. It's just, is it a little higher or lower in your sky right now? That's the only difference, really.
I've got an interesting question here, and you might be able to help me with this answer. Somebody was wondering, they're outside observing the lunar eclipse right now. They said, what is that big orangey star north of Orion? And if I remember correctly, I would guess that Mars is pretty near Orion right now. Is that correct?
So there is, okay, I'm looking up. Yes, that is, oh, wait a minute, hang on. Yes, that's Mars. So there is, oh wow, oh, the moon is almost fully within the shadow. It'll
I
be
know, I can see we've
two,
got just the littlest sliver of light
yep,
here on the stream. So exciting.
two more minutes. But so Orion, if you look at Orion's belt points to the right, and you run into an orangey colored star. That's the star Aldebaran. That's the eye of Taurus the Bull. But there's a brighter orange light up above that, and brighter than Aldebaran. That's Mars. Yes. And so if you take a look at Orion's belt, by the way, if you're looking at the moon, just look to the left. In the northern hemisphere, there it is, and in the northern hemisphere, about halfway up in the sky. So just describing where I am, so I can explain it to you. If you look at Orion's belt and you go to the left, that bright star to the other side is the star Sirius. So there we go. All right, one more minute till the moon is fully within the Earth's shadow.
Yeah, look at it go. It's getting real close. Just a little point there.
Yep.
Now, somebody made a comment that made me think about your situation right now, Michelle. They said they're in Chicago looking through the trees because their maple still has leaves. And you know what? Michelle had the exact same problem. She had a tree in her yard that was blocking it, which is why she couldn't join from her own house today.
Exactly, yes. I had to move my Sky Observers Hangout location because there was a tree in the way, and there was no guarantee that that tree was going to lose its leaves in time to be able to see the show, or to be able to show you the view. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm experiencing, or what I did, which is why I'm doing this from my brother and sister-in-law's backyard. They have a
Well,
much
boy, am I glad that you found
view.
a place where it worked out, because we really have gotten nothing but perfect, crystal clear views tonight.
Exactly. And the one thing that is also interesting, you may see my camera kind of struggling a little bit with showing the view, because the moon is pretty dark right now. So let me go back to, so I can't adjust the f-stop any lower to let in any more light. So at this point, I'm adjusting the shutter speed.
Yeah, you can tell it's really dim because it is, you know, some of those darker parts are a little bit grainier through the camera. You can tell it's really trying its best to pick up those faint lights. I think this would be a great time for lots of folks to go and check it out in their area now that we're finally getting to totality. You can still see a little bit of white there on the edge. I think technically it starts in 2 minutes, but we're so close already.
So let me show the regular view. So Hunter, can you see the regular view with the moon looking small? Just want to make sure you can see that.
Yes, it's
excellent. Yeah.
You can just barely see it.
Yep, and it's just showing you how small, deceptively small the moon is in the sky. And so what my camera is doing is showing an electronic zoom. So this box right here, I just double click and the center of that box centers on whatever it is I want the camera to center on. So this is just for those just joining us. We're doing this with a DSLR camera. This isn't a telescope. So just a normal camera. And I'm going to double click on the view and go back to the zoom view. There it is. And then I can adjust the location of the zoom view. electronically, so I don't have to keep moving my camera every few seconds or anything like I would with a telescope. If it wasn't tracking, of course. All right. Well, it is beautiful. I would say on the Danjon scale, we're leaning more toward. It's kind of like a gray orange, I think.
Yeah, so that's kind of a transition that you really see throughout the Danjon scale. You know, those brighter ones, they'll appear much more bright orange, but then as you get all the way down to the darker ones, especially down into the zeros, it's so dim that even if some of that light that's reflecting off of it is kind of orange, it's going to end up being pretty gray when you look at it with your eyes because it's so dim, it's hard to see.
By the way, I just turned my ring light off, so if my camera view disappeared, that's why.
Thank you. I was wondering what happened.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. Actually, I'm going to turn my camera off just briefly, just because I want to be able to see this. I want to see the eclipse without the ring light on, so I can give you a better description of the color. I would say, would you say, so I've got a family member over here to the right. Would you say kind of orangey gray? Orangey gray, yeah. Dusky gray is what we're seeing. And I can see Orion, I can see Taurus the bull, I can see Auriga the charioteer, I can see Gemini, I can see Mars. It is an absolutely gorgeous night in Chicago in November. We don't often get to say that.
Yeah, we had a good question here in the chat that I want to answer because it is kind of time sensitive. The question was, can you give us a heads up when the space station will pass over Chicago? So we're going to have actually an International Space Station passing here in Chicago in just a few minutes. The start will be at 4:26. It's going to be coming from the southeast and passing a little bit north and ending at 4:28. So that'll be fun to look out for anybody out viewing the lunar eclipse in Chicago here tonight. Thanks for bringing that up. I didn't know that was happening right now at the same time.
Oh, wow.
We actually have another one at 6 as well.
So how high is it going to get in the sky?
Let's see. The maximum it'll be, I'm not sure what the exact altitude is. I know it's starting at 41 degrees, but that's not I'm not sure if that's the altitude in the sky. That might be its location in the sky.
That might be altitude. Wow, that's starting pretty high up, and it would have to because we're still a couple hour and a half-ish away from sunrise. So it would make sense that it might start that high up. And so what time does it start? And I'm just looking up at the sky to see if I can.
4:26 is when we'll be getting a pass here where it'll be visible. Yeah, so taking a look, I did check on Stellarium. It's a great website to look at what's going on in the sky tonight in your area. And then, yeah, it looks at 4:26. It'll be about 40 degrees up in the sky when it starts to become visible. And then it'll set around 11. It'll be invisible around 11 degrees. That's when it'll go out of vision. But that will be in the east, the opposite direction of the lunar eclipse tonight.
And what direction does it start at? Sorry.
East southeast. So
it starts in the east southeast. I might not see it. I don't know if it's east southeast because I've got a house directly behind me. So.
But yeah, for anybody joining and watching in Chicago, I know the location you picked was probably best suited for western facing views, but if you can see east too, that's something fun to check out tonight.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, that is a gorgeous eclipse. Oh my goodness. Wow, let me adjust the settings just slightly.
Seeing some folks here in the chat saying they've got their telescopes out tonight, taking some astrophotography. Very exciting. Maybe you can share those with us, tag us if you post them online. Let us know that you got some good views.
I've got it set with the settings pretty close to how I actually see it in the sky.
Yeah, so really
So-
dim there. You can see that bottom right corner where it passed into the umbral shadow of the Earth last is still a little bit brighter, but wow, that top left corner you can just barely make out the shape there.
Exactly. I was just taking a quick picture with the camera so that I can check it afterwards and see what kind of picture I got. I'm gonna just mess with the focus just a tiny bit. Oops.
Got some folks joining us from some different areas. Somebody just woke up in Guatemala and says that the sky is clear and it's super visible.
Good morning, Guatemala.
And we've also got some folks joining from Indiana, where it is an hour later. That is true, but you should still see the same lunar eclipse that we're seeing here now. So make sure to go outside, check it out if you've got clear weather.
So that was me just checking the focus. What I like to do is take it out of focus to start with, and then I can get it back in just to make sure. But you can see again, this eclipse is dark enough that the camera is struggling a little bit to show it. So just because it's super dark, which is neat. But again, not as dark as the one that was in May.
I'd love to hear in the chat anybody that is able to see the lunar eclipse right now. What kind of viewing experience are you getting? What does your lunar eclipse look like? Well, it should be at a similar stage as ours. The appearance might be pretty different depending on your local conditions. So I'd love to hear what people are seeing, what kind of colors they're seeing on the moon right now.
And for those also just joining us, you're hearing a disembodied voice. My camera is off right now, or my video camera is off right now because I wanted to turn my ring light off so I could actually see this pretty well. And you don't need to see me, it's okay.
I'm sorry to hear that some of us here in the chat are not so much seeing the moon, but are seeing clouds right now. Now, I will say on the bright side, while this is the last lunar eclipse we'll see in Chicago for a couple of years, these ones are much more common than a solar eclipse. Lunar eclipses happen, pretty frequently. There's a couple a year, and they'll happen in different parts of the world. But the likelihood of you being able to see one again in a few years is pretty high. And if you go on that time and date website, you'll be able to see every single one that's coming up. So.
Yeah, and the difference between the two, why they're you can see one a little better. It isn't necessarily that there are more of them. It's that a much wider swath of the world can see it. So for a solar eclipse, you've got the shadow of the moon on the surface of the Earth, cast onto the surface of the Earth, and the shadow is smaller. And then the darkest part of the shadow, that inner part of the moon shadow on the Earth, is really small. And so you have to be in a very, very well-defined location at a very specific time to be able to see a total solar eclipse. So for a lunar eclipse, as long as you are facing the moon during the time when totality is happening, or even during a partial phase, you'll see it. And so that's why lunar eclipses, while they happen about as often, approximately, they're a lot more accessible. You also don't need special equipment to be able to see it. So that's why I can show this to you with a just plain old ordinary DSLR camera. If we were looking at the sun, we would need specific protection for our eyes, for sure, and for the camera as well.
Glad to see that our astronomer friend Geza was still able to get outside and get a view of the lunar eclipse there briefly, although
Nice.
he did, and he said he woke up the whole family to come and check it out. Wonderful.
Nice.
I've seen some other folks talking about having their families out taking a look tonight. So exciting.
Wow, I don't think I've seen a gray orange eclipse before. Rick red in May, gray orange, or orange gray, dusky orange. We may go with that description for this one. Just amazing.
I like this comment here. This is from Ben. Said, "It's so cool. but spooky. Now, an important note is that Ben is 7.
Hi, Ben.
Love that comment. And it kind of makes me think about like the history of eclipse viewing. There have been times in history where, we didn't know so much about space and we would have looked at something like this and thought like, oh my gosh, what could be happening? People all around the world had different stories that they developed around the eclipses. So it's exciting to think that like this is something that a sensation that people have been feeling for millennia at this point. And but now that we can all come together, be excited for these eclipses, come out and watch them together, it's such an exciting opportunity.
Exactly. And Hunter, are you able to see my the main screen for the camera, the small screen? Are you still seeing the close-up
I'm
view?
still seeing the zoomed in view right now.
No problem. I'm gonna go back to the regular live view again, just to show you how small the moon is, or how in the sky. But I'm unlocking the tripod just to move the moon up a little bit because it's getting lower in the sky.
Bob here in the Chicago suburbs just said that he's looking at the space station in the southeast sky right now. So if you're in Chicago, take a look that way now if you want to see it.
That's cool. Yeah, it's on the other side of the house from where I am right here, so I can't see it. That's okay. That's all right. Wow.
Really great dim view tonight. I saw some folks saying in the chat that they were actually seeing a pretty similar image to what we were seeing on screen here, that real dusky orange color, but with some parts almost difficult to see because it's so dark. So I think you're doing a pretty good job of recreating the eye look that you're seeing there, Michelle.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that when the moon is within the Earth's shadow, you can still tell which part is the outer part of the shadow that the moon is going away from, or into the inner part of the shadow and the darkest part. So you can still see that little tiny bit of lighter part on one side. And that's just because that part of the shadow is just a little bit lighter, and the inner part is just a little bit darker.
Yeah, it makes me think back to the animation on the Time and Day website when we could see that circle of the shadow of the Earth, that it was usually much closer over there to the right side. So you can really observe that difference that it makes here.
Exactly. And then depending on which part of the shadow the moon is encountering for different lunar eclipses, you'll see that lighter part maybe on the bottom or on the side or whatever. It just depends on which part of the shadow the moon is encountering. And that's different for every eclipse. What I'm seeing in the sky is just a remarkable winter scene, because we're heading toward the winter time right now. Much as we may not want to admit it, we are in the Northern Hemisphere. But what you get in the winter is some of the best sky viewing because you've got bright stars. So if you're out right now and you didn't hear my quick little explanation of what else you can see in the sky, if you're in a dark enough sky. So you've got the moon, and I want you to look over to the left of the moon. And I'm going to use my, actually, let me turn my light back on. Hang on, I'm going to turn my camera on as soon as I can find where I put my light remote, which I've got it here. Oh, there it is. And let me turn that back on. There we go. And I'm going to turn my camera view back on so you can see me. And I want to do this quick explanation because we talked about this before. Can you see me okay, Hunter?
Yeah, you look great.
Excellent. So, oh, thank you. It's early. So you want to stretch out your fists at arm's length, and the bottom part of your fist to the top subtends an angle of 10 degrees of sky. So I'm going to use this 10 degrees of sky as marked by my fist to be able to find other things. So now I'm going to turn my light back off, and I'm going to guide you around the sky a little bit. There we go. I'm going to stop my video because the camera will probably go dim. All right, so I'm going to still show the moon on the camera, but if you're actually out watching the sky right now, I want you to put the bottom part of your right fist right at the edge of the moon, the left edge, and then take your other fist and stick it up against the top part of your right fist. All right, so right now the angle that is subtending in the sky is 20 degrees. And so then you want to go about twice as far. So you can see I've covered about half the distance in between the moon and the next set of bright stars over to the left. So that next set of bright stars over to the left is the constellation Orion. And Orion is a hunter, but just like Hunter I've got
Yeah,
on
hey,
this
just like
screen.
me.
There you go. So, or he looks like a sideways bow tie. So the sideways bow tie, we've got the 3 stars that form his belt. And if you then look up above, you've got 2 stars, and down below are 2 stars. And depending on the angle that you're seeing him at, it may be a different angle. But the 2 stars up at the top, the one to the left is orange. That one's Betelgeuse. The one to Betelgeuse's right or to the west is Bellatrix. And then down below the belt, the star to the left, Orion's knees, the left is called Saiph, S-A-I-P-H, Saiph. And then the one to the right, which is brighter, is Rigel. So the 2 brightest in Orion are Betelgeuse, the orange one to the top left, as I'm seeing it, and Rigel down below to the bottom right. And if you take Orion's belt and you follow it down to the left, to the east, you're going to run into the brightest star in our northern hemisphere nighttime sky. We've got the star Sirius, also called the dog star. And if you take a look back at Orion and you look up above Orion's head, you'll see a bright orange thing. That's the planet Mars. So we are getting to see Mars brighter and brighter in the sky until the end of November, when it'll be at its brightest, early December. And Hunter, do we want to give them a quick sneak preview of what's going to happen on the evening of December 7th here as visible in the Chicago area? You want to chat
Yes,
about that for just a
absolutely.
second?
Yeah. So we'll be doing another Sky Observers Hangout on December 7th, just about a month away. That one will be starting at 9 o'clock Central Standard Time. But of course, make sure to check out the YouTube live stream link, just like you did for today. That'll give you a heads up when it'll be starting. And what we'll be looking at that night is extra exciting. One, because of what we'll be looking at it through, and because it's kind of a fun, unique event. So we'll be live streaming from the Doan Observatory. It's the observatory at the Adler Planetarium, just right out behind it on Lake Michigan. And we have got a big 24-inch telescope that we'll be using to watch an event called an occultation. Now, what happens during this occultation is that we will have our eyes on Mars, and we'll see it as it passes behind the moon and reappears on the other side about an hour later. So that's called an occultation. We'll be seeing it, we'll start the live stream just before it passes behind the moon and then end it after it reappears on the other side. Take that opportunity to talk about the moon and Mars and watch a pretty unique celestial event happen.
Yeah, and actually I've brought up Stellarium on my screen. So why don't I do that real quick, because I can show Stellarium, I can show what this occultation might look like. So hang on, there we go. There's Stellarium. All right, can you see it?
Yeah, it looks great. Thank you.
All right, so this is a live view. Sorry, I'm doing this with my mouse here. So here's Orion right here. Here's the moon. So yep, we've got the lunar eclipse happening right now. So I'm scrolling inward to increase the size. By the way, I heard a media mention it somewhere, and I don't remember where, that, hey, your Uranus is visible above the moon. No, it's not really. It's really, really dim. You can't really see it. So
especially
yeah.
next to that big bright
Yeah,
moon, it would be tough to see it there.
It'd be tough to see. So I'm going to adjust Stellarium to December 7th. I'm going to move Hunter's video window out of the way. And I'm going to go to when the occultation will happen.
Yeah, so that'll be just after 9.
Exactly. So
Kind of a
Go
fun little
over.
sneak peek of what we'll get to see that night.
Yep. So here I'm gonna get it to about 9:06 p.m.
Hmm.
And this is what you can do to see if the occultation will be visible from your area. Go to Stellarium, dial it up. Now, you may not see, actually, a lot of places won't see the eclipse or the occultation at exactly the same time as Chicago. This is a case of you will have to check your specific circumstances. As you can see, there's Mars right there. See it? That little dot.
It's so little down there.
So little. And then I'm going to step forward in minutes. I'm going to have to keep adjusting it. And the moon is passing. The moon is moving and it's passing. Whoops, sorry. It's passing in front of Mars. And now you can't see it. It has blocked Mars. So depending on where you are, this time may be different, and it probably will be. For some folks, it'll start earlier. For other folks, it'll be later. So the Western US will see it earlier. The Europe will see it later. So it will be December 7th, Chicago time. It'll happen December 8th. Europe time, so December 8th in the early morning. So this is a case of you need to check a resource like Stellarium or some other sky app that you might have for your phone, dial it up for your specific location, and that'll tell you whether or not you might actually see the occultation.
Someone was asking in the chat if it's visible in Chicago. So I'm not sure if you're referring to the occultation or the eclipse, but the nice part is the answer to both is yes. The eclipse is visible here in Chicago right now, and we'll definitely be checking out the occultation from here in Chicago in December. So I hope we can see all of you when that time comes.
Hey, I see that I can see part of a comment. It's behind a window. Do I see that someone in Kobe, is that Kobe, Japan? And someone here is watching the moon at exactly the same time, right this very second.
That is so awesome. That's a great comment that they're able to talk to each other, observe together, even from so far away. I love when space brings people together like that, don't you, Michelle?
Yes, I do. And there aren't a whole lot of things on this planet that that everybody can watch for themselves, not just watch on a screen. Because thank you for joining us on a screen, and we're showing you this on a screen. But for many of you, you're out watching the real sky right now, and that's what this really is all about: connecting with each other and connecting under the sky we all share. This is basically the mission of the Adler Planetarium, connecting you all to the sky, connecting you all to each other under the sky we all share. And that's what we're all about. Well, we are going to be wrapping up pretty soon. We figure the rest of this eclipse you can go out and see for yourself. And we've been on for, oh my goodness, an hour 40. Wow.
Time flies when you're having fun, though.
I know. Well, let's give it a few more minutes. And so this is your last chance. Ask us some questions if you want. Geza is still in the background there, our astronomer Geza, answering questions. And tell us where you're watching from. We know some folks are probably waking up right now and just joining us and going, wow, there's a lunar eclipse. And so, yeah, it's happening right now, and you can go out and see it if it's clear out where you are and the moon is up where you are. But any last minute questions?
We did have a request for our last view of the moon here.
Yeah.
Would you mind moving your mouse over to the right side?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. We've got lots of folks, saying thanks here in the chat, and we've really appreciated everyone coming today. Yeah, we want to end a little bit early in the totality so that folks still have a chance to go out and see it for themselves. I know I got to get outside. I haven't seen it yet with my own eyes. Yes, you do.
That is
so
the other reason.
I'm definitely going out and checking it out as soon as things are over. So one thing before we go, for anybody who has taken any photos tonight or taken any reports on your observations, we'd love to hear it. We've been talking about that throughout this journey today. I know some of you mentioned in the chat that you had tagged us in some of the pictures you were taking. So if you do that, use the hashtag #lookup. and we will be able to find that there with you. Thank you so much for joining us today and supporting our programming. We love sharing this time with you. And as always, we'd like to get some feedback from you as well. Towards the end here of the live stream, Colleen will be linking a feedback survey in the chat. It should be really quick, a short time to fill out. And if you filled it out before, we appreciate you doing it again here so we can keep track of the improvements we're making and how we can make these shows better for you in the future.
And we really do read that. It isn't a form that goes off into the ether. We really do read the responses. So yes, please do fill that out. And for those who are just joining us and you didn't see me on the camera before, hi, I'm Michelle. But I was had my camera off so you could see the eclipse the best way possible. I'm going to adjust the settings one last time on my camera so we can enjoy this eclipse together. I'm going to brighten it up just a tiny bit. Again, just kind of match what I see in the sky. Definitely an orange eclipse this time around instead of the red one that we got. So I've got it pretty well set to how I'm really seeing it in the sky. Just amazingly orange color. So as we sign off tonight, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to leave the view running for another minute or two. But if you're inside and it's clear where you are, throw on those sweats and that winter coat and go outside and go enjoy the eclipse. Hunter, thank you. Geza, thank you. Colleen in the background, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hunter, any last thought before we leave tonight?
No, I don't think so. I've had a great time viewing this with everybody tonight. Hopefully we'll see you again in December. Make sure to go out and catch these last views of this eclipse. We're just about to reach the maximum here in Chicago. It should be everywhere in other places too. So a perfect time to go and look at it right now. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Clear skies to all of you, and hopefully we'll see you in the future.
Thanks a lot. We're going to turn off our microphones and our video cameras. I'm going to turn off the light. I'm going to let you enjoy the eclipse one last time. Thank you, everyone. See you at the next show, December 7th, 9 p.m. Central Time. Good night.
All right,
or
we'll
good
see you
morning.
then. Good night or good morning, everybody.
Bye-bye.